Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we are from group 7. We're going to present about clauses and grammatical function. Okay, this is our group members. There are 6 members in our groups. Next. So the first that I'm going to explain is types and meaning of construction. The meaning of construction. The relatively general patterns that recur in given language, since words, phrases, clauses, and sentences built out of smaller units according to particular patterns. The concept of constructions is relevant to all areas of grammar. Next is types of construction. The first type is declarative. In declarative constructions, the verb can be followed by a noun, phrase, and a prepositional phrase, and it is also can be part of passive and active. So for the example, the first is passive. Together was spoke for Jane by Budi, and the second is active. Budi put the together for Jane. And the second types of construction is interrogative. Interrogative construction are divided into 2 types. First is interrogative yes, no, and WH interrogative. The first interrogative yes, no is used to ask questions, such as example, did he call? And the answer is yes or no. And the second is WH interrogative is used to ask questions about participants in the situations. Who is calling or when did he call?
Okay, next we have relationship among contraction and copular contraction. Next. Okay, first there are relationship between constructions. 2 central ideas lie behind the use of the word system. One is that each of the above construction share certain properties with some of the other construction. The other is that it is possible to specify the relationship between the construction. Okay, there's a sample for this. 7A, Frank bought the piano for Jane. 7B, Frank bought Jane the piano. 7C, the piano was bought for Jane by Frank. 7A is the basic declarative, which is the most frequent type of construction in English. Because speakers most often make assertions, indeed assertions about agents, and it allows the widest range of modifications. This basic construction is related to the other construction and build another path to lead as in example 7B and C. Okay, next there are 3 constructions to connect an example shown in example number 10. 10A, Frank bought something for Jane. Consists non-copula, declarative, active, object. Then B, did Frank buy something for Jane? Consists for non-copula, interrogative, yes, no, active, object. And then C, what did Frank buy for Jane? Consists for non-copula, interrogative, WH, active, and object. Okay, next, there are copular contraction. Contractions are divided into copula and non-copula. Then each of these divided into declarative and interrogative, and so on. We will treat passive as non-copula because a number of constituents can occur in passive that are typically excluded from copula clauses. For example, a verb such as immediately. Okay, there are example for there are 3 types for copula construction. 11A, Fiona is very happy, consists for copula and ascriptive. 11B, Fiona is the best student, consists for copula and equative. 11C, Fiona is outtermachi, consists for copula and locative. Copula is the Latin word for link and connection. The motivation for the different level is that the construction in example number 11. Copula is a Latin word for link connection. The motivation for the different level is that the contraction in example 11 and their Latin equivalents do not describe situation in which one participant perform an action, possibly on another person or thing. Rather, the verb merely links the subject noun phrase with another phrase. In this case, an adjective phrase very happy in example 11a, a noun phrase the best student in 11b, and a proportional phrase in Okjemukji in example 11c. Ascriptive copula clauses are used to ascribe a property to an entity. In example 11a, happiness is ascribed to Fiona. Accusative copula clauses are used to state that one entity is identical with another entity on the assumption that there are 2 entities for Fiona and the best student, that these 2 entities are one and the same person. Fiona is equated to the best student. The label copula locative is self-explanatory. This construction is used in order state where some entity is located. The copula construction display a number of peculiarities compared with the intransitive constructions. Example number 11E until C cannot be made passive, and the pronoun that is the complement of the copula is in the nominative form. In fact, the copula clauses can be declarative or interrogative, and they can be yes, no, or WH interrogative. Copula clauses cannot be passive, and they do not have double object. Next will be explained by my friend Nikki.
Okay, so next I'm going to explain about the clause and sentence, main clause, and subordinate clause. So the first one, next please. The first one, we're going to explain about the clause and sentence. So, clause and sentence, it is an appropriate point to discuss the central concepts of main clause and subordinate clause, because without them, we cannot discuss the organization of clauses into the sentence which make up an effective written text. So the first one is about the major properties of main clause and subordinate clause. First, each clause contains a finite verb. Finite verb is a verb marked for tense, person, and number. And then tense has to do with whether the speaker or writer used a past tense verb or a present tense verb. And then person has to do with whether an action is assigned to the speaker. For the example is, I am listening. For the first person, the hearer, which is the second person, you are listening. Or someone other than the speaker and hearer, he or she is listening, as the third person. And the last one is number, that has to do with whether the speaker or writer refers to one person. For the example, she is listening, which is singular, or more than one, they are listening, for plural. Next, each clause, the finite verb, is accompanied by its complements and adjuncts. Next, each clause is marked for aspects. And also the aspects can be changed. For the example, Wickham was eloping with Lydia as opposed to Wickham eloped with Lydia. Next, please. Each clause has mood. That has to do with two sets of distinction. The first one, the distinction between making statements. The example is Wickham eloped with Lydia. Asking question, did Wickham elope with Lydia? And then the last one is issuing question. I'm sorry. The last one is issuing comments. The example is elope with Lydia. And then the second distinction is the speaker or writer presents even as possible. The example is he may have eloped with Lydia. Necessary. The example is he must have eloped with Lydia. And the last one, as a fact. And the example is he did elope with Lydia. Next, both allow certain changes of syntax to reflect changes of focus or emphasis. And also, clauses describe the situation. And the last one, next please. Oh, sorry. Can you please go back to the previous slide? Yeah. And the last one, both can be the first contribution to a discourse, whether spoken or written. Next. And now, after the major properties of main clause and subordinate clause, there are also text clause and system clause. So the first one, text clause. Clauses in real text are called text clause. We can recognize these clauses in novels, newspaper, poems, academic textbook, and even the transcript of conversation. The second one is clause in analysis that are called system clause, capturing the fact that in analysis it is to establish a system of grammar, and clauses are part of the system. Next, please. Now we're going to talk about the main clause and subordinate clause. So writer usually put clauses together into a sentence, and it is for the activity that main clause and the different type of subordinate clause are essential. Some sentence in text consisting of a single main clause, but many consist of several clauses, depending on what type of clause are combined. Two types of multi-clause sentence are distinguished. And there are compound sentence consists of two or more clauses joined by conjunction. The example is Captain Benwick married Louisa Hayter and Captain Wentworth married Anne Elliot. The other example, Henry Crawford loved Fanny, but Fanny loved Edmund. So, in the first example, the clause Captain Benwick married Louisa Hayter and Captain Benwick married Annie Elliot are conjoined by Anne. And the second example, the clause Henry Crawford loved Fanny and Fanny loved Edmund are conjoined by but. Next, please. Next is about subordinate clause. The complex sentence consists of a main clause and one or more other clauses subordinate to it. That is one clause, the main clause, is preeminent in a complex sentence and the other clause, the subordinate clause, are subject to certain limitation. For the complement clause, there are two examples. Elizabeth regretted that she had met Wickham, and Catherine feared that the abbey was haunted. So these clauses were traditionally called noun clause because they occur in slots in the main clause that can be occupied by ordinary noun phrases. So in the first example, Elizabeth regretted her action and Catherine feared the general's temper. The contemporary label complement clause reflect the relationship the clause and the verb of the main clause. And then there is adverbial clause. The name adverbial suggests the adverbial clause modify verb because they modify the whole clauses. For the example, the first one, the first one of the adverbial clause is reason. The example is because Marianne loved Willoughby, she refused to believe that he had deserted her. In the sentence, it gives the reason, or the writer use it to give the reason why Marianne refused to believe that Willoughby was gone. And then the second one is about time. It gives the time at which another event happened. And the third one is concession. It conveys a concession. For the example, although Miss Dorothy disliked Miss Bennet, he married Elizabeth. The fourth one is manner. It describes the manner. In this example, Henry changed his plan as the mood took him. So it describes the manner in which Henry changed his plan. And the last one is condition. If Emma had left Hartfield, Mr. Woodhouse would have been unhappy. So it conveys the circumstance or condition under which a particular situation would have arisen. And actually, the last one is about relative clause. So relative clause are called adjective clause, reflecting the fact that adjective also modify nouns. So it marked by which, who, and that. Next, please.
Complementizer and subordinating conjunction. Next. Complementizer or complementizer is a word used to introduce a complement clause including subordinate conjunction, relative pronouns, and relative adverbs, such as while, since, because, although, if, when, so that, as such, before, after, until, as long as soon as, that, once. Example, I wonder if she will come. She will come is a complement clause and the word if in the sentence is a complementizer that used to introduce a complement clause. Next, please. Subordinating conjunction is a word or phrase that links a dependent clause to an independent clause. The example of subordinating conjunction is after, although, because, once, as, before, while, until, where, wherever, when, whenever, etc. The example is, I have been a singer since I was young. Since in that sentence means from the time when. Since is categorized as a cause conjunction. In that sentence, the word since used to join a dependent clause to an independent clause. Next will be explained by my friend Radit.
So I will explain what is finite and non-finite clause. Next. First, the finite clause is influenced by the tenses.
It can be present tense, past tense, future tense, etc. As I explained below, he joined the class is past tense. He present a speech, present. The first example is the past tense. So joined, there is an additional ed while he presents a speech, present plus s. He presents. So there is a changes in the sentences. The verb will change depending on the tense. If the tense is simple past tense, the verb is always in the form of verb to. Then the present tense will also change, namely adding s or es. And the verb in finite clause can be influenced by the subject. The first word, drink, is different from the second, that is drinks. The first, I drink, does not change because the subject is I, while she drinks change because the subject is she. So it becomes like she drinks, which comes from drink with an added s behind it. Finally, if the finite clause is modified by number, in this situation, singular or plural, the verb will change. If there are more than one object, use are. But if there is only one, use is. For example, if I say, there is a book on the table. So the plural form becomes, there are 10 books on the table. If the object only has one, use is. But if it only has more than one, you can use are. That is the distinction. So the verb will then change in the finite clause, which is influenced by the tenses, subject, and number. Okay, the next one, finite clause is also main clause or independent clause. So a sentence that can stand alone is a finite clause, but it can also be a dependent clause or subordinate clause. As in the following example, I know the boy who stands over there. Who stands over there is a dependent clause or subordinate clause, which remains a finite clause because the word stand can be affected by the tenses. For example, it becomes I know the boys. The word boys is plural, who stand over there. The word stand doesn't use s, right? So because the verb can be changed depending on the tense, it's still included in the finite clause. Next. Yes. The next step is non-finite clause. Non-finite clause, also known as tenseless, because the verb in non-finite clause is not influenced by tenses in the main clause. So non-finite clause is a subordinate clause or dependent clause that cannot stand alone. As an example, I want to eat a pizza. The word to eat pizza cannot stand alone. It must be connected to the main clause. And then non-finite clause consists of 4 types. The first is non-finite bare infinitive. For example, I will go buy some drinks. The word buy some drinks is the non-finite clause, which is a bare infinitive that uses verb 1. Then non-finite to infinitive. I will go to buy some drinks. To buy some drinks. To buy. To infinitive. To, which is followed by verb 1, is a non-finite clause. The third example, non-finite present participle uses verb aim. For example, I see a girl buying some drinks. Buying some drinks is a non-finite clause, which the sentence is a non-finite present participle. Next, non-finite past participle. I read novel written by Raditya Dika. Written by Raditya Dika is a non-finite past participle because it uses verb 3. Written in verb is verb 3. So unlike the finite clause, the non-finite clause verb is unaffected by tenses, subject, or number. And actually, in the non-finite clause example, the sentence above, in those sentences, there is also a finite clause. For example, in the sentence, I will go buy some drinks. I will go is a finite clause. The word will can be changed to would go. Next, I see a boy who stands over there is a finite clause because see can be affected by tenses. For example, I saw a girl and he sees a girl and so on. So in the conclusion, in one sentence, it can consist of several clauses. Next will be presented by my friend Rio.
I will talk about subject, direct object, indirect object, and oblique object. The first one is subject. Subject is the part of a sentence or clause that indicates what is it about or who or what performs the action. The example is Sally plays the guitar. The action of playing the guitar is done by Sally, making Sally the subject. Direct object. Direct object answers the question what or whom. It is usually followed by the verb. The example is the girl makes a salad. The salad is made by the girl, and that makes the salad a direct object. And then the boy pilots the plane, then John kicks the ball. Indirect object. Indirect object is the recipient of the direct object. Indirect object answers the question of who or what. The example is Harry gives his girlfriend a rose. A rose is the direct object, and his girlfriend is the recipient of the direct object or the rose, making it an indirect object. Oblique object. Oblique object is the same as indirect object, but it only occurred in prepositional phrases in, on, at, and etc. The example is the girl gave milk to her cat. Her cat is the recipient of milk, making it an indirect object. But since it occurs in prepositional phrases, it becomes an oblique object. Thank you.